Hi, folks, and as you might recall, I had mentioned that Greg McMillan, famous running coach, had identified that the top three predictors of racing performance were your pace at lactate threshold, your running economy, and your VO2 max. So today I thought I'd talk a little bit about lactate thresholds. First of all, what is lactate threshold? Well, lactate, that's the point at which your body is producing lactic acid faster than it can clear it. Think about the windshield wipers on your car as an example, because you're producing it all the time. You just usually get it cleared out right away. So when you just have a light rain going on, you put the wipers on like this, it keeps everything clear. The harder it rains, the faster the wipers go. There gets to be a point in time, though, if you've ever been in a really horrendous rainstorm where the wipers can't even keep up anymore. Similar thing with lactic acid building up. There's a point where you're building it up faster than you can clear it out of your system. And for most people, that's about an hour. Once you hit that point, you got about an hour and you're going to bonk. Now, a couple of things to know about lactic acid. It's made up of two parts. It's made up of lactate and it's made up of hydrogen ions. You don't really need to know that, but what's interesting is the hydrogen ions are the bad things. They're the ones that are going to cause you to eventually bonk. The lactate itself gets used as a fuel, so it's really not a bad thing to have that. But the key thing is it's about an hour. So we use races to approximate where your lactate effort or threshold is. And the reason I say that we use races is the only way that you can really know exactly where your lactate threshold is to get on a treadmill, do one of those tests, but they also take blood from you. So for those of you who said, well, gee, I've done a stress test, I've done a test, they told me my lactate threshold is such and such, they're guessing, and it's probably a really good guess because lactate threshold is typically very, very close to something called the anaerobic threshold. But really, the only true way to know exactly where your lactate threshold is with a blood test. And I haven't had that. I would guess that most of you have not had that either. So how do we improve it? Well, the best way to improve it is to try and work right under, this is the threshold, you want to work right underneath it. So the runs that we look at that we do, steady state, tempo intervals, and cruise intervals, anytime you see those in your plan, one of the purposes of that run is to help improve your ability to clear lactate. Now, I've got the asterisk by tempo because tempo is the one that you normally have right at that threshold. Something I should comment there too. Tempo runs are also routinely used to describe a run at a steady goal pace for a half marathon or a marathon pace. So you might look at, say, for example, a Hal Higdon plan, and he'll say, hey, I want you to be running a tempo run. What he's really talking about is a lot more race pace running. We're using tempo to describe trying to get up to that lactate threshold. So that's the very best run for doing that, but all of them help contribute to that. Steady state is a little bit slower than tempo. Tempo intervals and cruise intervals are a little bit faster than what the tempo pace would be, but because they're intervals, your heart rate remains more steady because it's really an effort-based thing. Now, the effort-based thing is important because it's really a narrow window and effort is key. So if we looked at your aerobic zone, your easy running, your long runs, most people have a really wide range of what they can run in and still be getting some aerobic benefit. When it comes to your tempo workouts in particular, like I say, they're right up against a threshold. It's usually a very, very narrow range that you're trying to hit. So if you're a little bit under that, you will still improve your body's ability to clear lactate. It just isn't as effective as if you get right up against it. Here's the other side of it, though. If you shoot too far, the effort is too hard. Same thing. You don't really get all the maximum benefit from that. So it's kind of tricky to be in there. And even though we use paces, I might say I want your pace to be in such and such of a window. It really is very effort-based. Frankly, all the other ones are effort-based as well, but this one in particular. What's the effort you're looking for? Your breathing should be hard, but it should be controlled. You probably don't want to talk, but you can. It's a pace you think you could hold for about an hour. You should be able to talk in sentences. If you're able to be conversational, the effort probably isn't hard enough to be right up against where that threshold is. On the other hand, if all you do is spit, that's too hard. You've crossed over, you've gone the other way. So you want to be able to talk in sentences. You want to be breathing hard. You want to have a controlled effort. The other question might come up is, so if the number one predictor of race performance is going to be what my pace is at my lactate threshold, then why don't I just do tempo runs all the time and really work at getting that good? There's a lot of reasons. So one, aerobic base. You can never outrun your aerobic base. A marathon is over 99% aerobic. A half marathon is 98%. Even a 5K is 84% aerobic. No matter how good you try and make that lactate pace, you cannot outrun wherever your aerobic base is. The other part is recovery. So good things don't happen when you run. Good things happen when you recover from the run. If somebody went out and ran at a tempo pace all the time, they'd never recover. And eventually they'd probably get injured from running at that pace all the time. So the recovery is the key. So for the most part, we're usually looking to have 1, maybe 2 runs within that range over the course of the week. You don't need a lot to improve it, but we do need to have those. They're usually a part of your plan. And remember, narrow window, think more about the effort than the pace.